In this April edition of Pure Michigan Trains, from a monster CSX Q335 to the Northern Woods and Marquette Rails shortline action, this episode has a little bit of everything. This is Pure Michigan Trains, presented by the Thornapple River Rail Series. Two miles south of downtown Grand Rapids, we're at Pleasant Street, where Y-297 is heading for the Grand Elk. Here they diverge off the CSX mainline and onto the Hugart Runner en route to Grand Elk's Hugart Yard with a transfer freight. Once upon a time, Pleasant Street was the busiest railroad junction in western Michigan, but today all that remains is the CSX mainline in this branch to the Moose. "30 miles west of Grand Rapids, in Holland on a blustery afternoon, CSX E949 holds the main for Q326. Train Q326 is inbound from the Bar Yard in Chicago and takes the restricting indication into Waverly Yard. With the manifest in the clear, the empty coal train resumes their run to Chicago and eventually the coal fields of Wyoming's Powder River Basin. The depot here dates well back into the Pure Marquette era, renovated in the early 1990s in keeping with its original character. We catch up with a Q326 moments later in Zeeland after they pause to collect the Waverly Yard power for the ferry move to Wyoming Yard. Before long, they're coasting into Granville over the creek in Jenison. "136 track miles from Grand Rapids, we are in Porter, Indiana, and the western terminus of the CSX Grand Rapids subdivision at control point 482 on the Norfolk Southern Chicago line. We are here to meet Amtrak's train number 370 and then chase them up the line to Holland." North of Benton Harbor, Michigan, they're making good time at Riverside. Just over an hour later, train 370 is pulling into the station in Holland. They are shortly once again underway, departing for the final 25-mile sprint to Grand Rapids. Days later, back in Grand Rapids, but at the former Amtrak station, we catch up with Y297 heading for the west side. With the GR&I busy these days with wheat for King Milling and Lowell, these west side jobs have had much more grain cars than for CSX's own online customers. "15 miles east at Alto, we find CSX Q235, a train we will chase all the way to New Richmond this afternoon. We are at Snow Road, where the lengthy general merchandise train is quickly approaching the metropolis, but is still passing scenic farmlands. With crew time about to expire, they pull up to the west end of Fox at the Patterson Avenue Bridge to await a recrew by Y150. An hour later, Y-150 is aboard and ready to finish the last few miles to Wyoming Yard. Moving just a bit to the west, East Paris and 36th Streets mark the beginning of the downhill run into town. From above at Sunnyside, they roll into Wyoming Yard, where Y-150 will prepare the train for their outbound Chicago departure. Currently, Q-335 carries traffic from Toledo, Ohio for Grand Rapids, as well as overhead freight for Chicago. 2 blocks, one for Grand Rapids and the other for Bar Yard, are set out here, with the bar traffic heading west on Q-327. Overhead traffic to the BRC continues on as Q-335, which we will discuss more about shortly. Therefore, Y-150 set out the rear 60 cars before they pulled up to Ivanrest for the recrew. It isn't long and the train is once more underway, knocking down the approach medium indication. "13 miles west of Friesland, they are hustling through the countryside. South of Holland, we catch them one last time at the Kalamazoo River Bridge. Later that evening, Amtrak 370 takes their turn on the bridge under the last touch of twilight. "90 miles north of Grand Rapids, in Scottville, we catch Marquette Rails Baldwin Blazer heading west as the sun bears down on the horizon. For a full-length presentation following a day's work on the Baldwin Blazer, check out our Day in the Life video, link in the description below. Thanks for watching this edition of Pure Michigan Trains. For more from the Thornapple River Rail Series, visit the channel page and subscribe.